When people say I'm afraid or use the word scared, I like to, again, just get curious. And I think anyone that says, oh, I'm not afraid to die, I'm like, you're a liar.
It's Suga Snake Takes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Suga Snake Takes. It's me, Jake the Snake Plummer, here with Rashad, Suga Evans. It's great to be alive. It's great to be breathing this air and feeling the sunshine and able to come together with you, Rashad, to have amazing guests on our show. Today, we have a guest that's going to make our listeners probably super uncomfortable. And it's amazing that this topic is going to make you so uncomfortable, but I think it's not him that's going to make you uncomfortable, because personally, he's a beautiful human that wants to help not only people on Earth, but help Mother Earth thrive and do better. It's the topic we're going to discuss, which is death. Eric Rooney, our guest today, is a death advocate and educates people about the process. He also works with transitioning people into death and the next stage, and has Half Moon Farm here in Colorado and Regeneration Earth, a nonprofit that he has set up that he will tell us more about as we go. But we're super excited to address this topic that is very taboo, that people don't want to talk about. As you said, we talked earlier, Eric, this isn't selling some kind of thing. This is facing the inevitable and becoming comfortable with it. And I think by the end of today's podcast, you'll see why this is one of the most perfect people to be doing this and educating and talking to people about dying. And without further ado, I want to welcome to the show Eric Rooney. Thanks for joining us today, Eric.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Rashad. I always light up when I get to talk about this. And so I think the only issues we'll have today, besides encouraging people to step outside of their normal thought processes, is reining in some type of time. This is a subject that may be new to a lot of people, and it may be something that brings up some really painful moments, and we refer to these as grief, which is something that actually connects us all. So thank you for having me here. I'm excited to share what I know through the experiences I've had, and I'm excited to learn alongside y'all and see where this takes us. And my intentions are just to educate, and going forward as a human being, I will always serve as a resource, and I commit to learning alongside the listeners and anyone else who may have input on their experience and how we can empower people to live a life of peace by planning for their death.
Well, I met Eric at an event up in North Boulder at Yellow Barn Farm, and was impressed, Eric, by your presence, your energy. You seem to be so at peace, and I imagine some of that comes from your work. Obviously, to be scared of death keeps us on edge, but to be all right with it and understand it at a deeper level helps you relax. I've had those experiences in medicine and in some journeys where I've come to grips with what death could be like, and more fear living than anything else. But what I want to know to start the show off, my first question to you is, like, maybe when you first, at what age or what moment in life did you become aware of, death? We all go through that at some age in our life. Someone dies, a grandma, a grandpa, an uncle, and we have to go, wait, he's not here. What is this death thing that people are talking about? Do you recall when that was, and if that was maybe something that led you down this path?
The earliest memory I can remember with that idea of impermanence of our physical life is when I was in third grade in Charlotte, North Carolina. My family and I had just moved from South Florida to the Carolinas, and I had a pet turtle. And learning about turtles, when we're kids, we know that they come onto the bank of the pond or some type of body of water, and they sunbathe, and that's really how they have the opportunity to warm up. Well, I put my tank outside and left my turtle in the tank and in the sun, and unfortunately, he baked to death. And for me at that moment, it was really heartbreaking. I remember feeling that as a third grader because I was in control of this opportunity to support life. And unfortunately, because of something silly, just an oversight, I unfortunately had inadvertently caused a death. And so I began to really think about it then. And I think I was born different in many different ways. I observe a lot because I often find myself asking if we're going to die, why are we doing this? Or if we're just going to die, why are we doing this? Why are we making these types of things important? And so it's always been a fascinating part of my life. And really, what I think got me thinking is storytelling from elders. When I was younger, I was always surrounding myself with elders, listening to their stories. It was something that really moved me in a lot of different ways. Maybe because I was thinking of like, oh, this is how we live, is we share our stories. And so as a young child, I also remembering that too, and the preciousness of, oh, hearing of this person died, or I heard about this tragedy. I remember Princess Diana's death. I remember sitting with my mom watching her funeral on TV, and these thousands and thousands of people. And as a younger kid, I was thinking of like all these different things we do to celebrate life and death. And as I got older, I started to look into different cultures and how we celebrated death. So my first memory is really that turtle, that turtle that I then composted, which we can do here in Colorado with human bodies. But I composted my turtle. I buried him in the ground, and I can remember going a few months later to dig him up, and he was no longer there. So whether an animal had gotten him, or most of them had been composted, is neither here nor there. But that was the first time I can really remember is that turtle.
Hmm. Wow. What was your turtle's name?
I never have
You
been a
don't remember?
namer as far
Okay.
as names. Even when I was a middle school science teacher for 6 years, and I told the kids, I said, and this is in August when we started school, I said, it's going to be probably until the holidays, the holiday break, until I know your names, as I've been more focused on other things, and names have been hard, but we never had a turtle for a name for the turtle.
That's awesome, man. So that fascination or just that situation took you to wanting to know more about death, and you kind of because I see I when I did the research, I seen that you started off with a plant, and then from plants you then started to work your way to the to the dead and the dying, and I feel like that transition was kind of a natural thing for you, being the fact that you were providing flowers for the funeral homes and things like that, and that probably gave you a closer look. But what was that thing that kind of brought you to this path of being a death doula?
Yeah, that's interesting that you made that connection, because a lot of people are like, you do so many things, so many different things. And I say, no, I don't. I care. I care for people, and I care for the earth, whether that is literally in germinating a seed. I have tons of plants around me that I grow, or that's germinating a seed inside somebody else in a maybe a metaphorical way of speaking, whether that's leveling up in their life or being able to visit death. And so looking back, again, going along the lines with this idea, I'm sure you've heard of permaculture and this idea of growing or regenerative farming, this idea of there's so many different ideas under the umbrella of permaculture. But for me, after my professors asked me, Eric, what'd you learn most in our permaculture class that you took? And my response was, and I said, I'm always honest. My response is that I've been doing everything right all along. Really, that as you intuitively listen to how you show up for yourself, that allows you to how to care for a plant. Oh, my plant looks like it's wilting. It looks like it needs water, or whatever it may be. And so looking back, it really began in high school. I would go to the mall, and it wasn't a place where I went shopping. I went to the food court because I just wanted to watch people. I wanted to see how people interacted, because I was just watching the world. I was watching how we did things, how we interacted, like how I should act. Is that how guys act? Is that how girls act? Like, how are we as animals? How are we as creatures of this earth cohabitating? And that kind of relayed into the teaching. And then I fell in love with plants in my landscaping business, commercial and residential. And I was teaching an incense growing and making workshop. how you could grow your incense in your garden. You could use it for religious or spiritual purposes, or even a broth, a chicken broth, or throwing it into some type of meal. But it's, lavender and thyme and rosemary and bundling it up. And in that class was an individual who said to me weeks later, Eric, I know your background in education, your background in environmental leadership. I'm curious if you're interested in investigating what it would be like to opening up a water crematory as a conservation advisor. And I was like, death? And I was brought back to the turtle. I was brought back to, witnessing all these things with the elders and the transitions in my community, being an altar boy in the Catholic Church for funerals. I would, growing up in private school, all these different things. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to jump into this death space. I want to see what this is about. And so we opened in 2021. I'm not affiliated necessarily as I was as I used to be, but that opportunity allowed me a peek into the disparities, the discrepancies, and quite frankly, the unconscious practices that Western culture has been enforcing upon our families and communities as ways to celebrate their loved ones who have died. And so we opened the crematory. I started hearing all these stories about people not being educated, people not knowing the plans they should have for if they were to die tonight. What are we going to do with your dog? Do you have a savings account for your funeral expenses? Are you being buried in North Carolina or Maine? And so as I have tended to be my whole life, I was like, well, I've got to do something about this. And so that's where I started Regeneration Earth. Simultaneously, I had just bought a flower farm. So when we opened the crematory, we needed somewhere for the liquid nourishment from the water cremation to go. And so over the past few years, I've worked with a few different crematories in returning human compost and liquid from water cremation to my flower farm. And so here in Lakewood, Colorado, I have a 1 acre flower and medicinal farm. And what we do is we allow the community to grieve in a different way. And so that's kind of my adventure here. And nowadays I spend my time consulting with individuals who are terminally ill, who are taking advantage of Colorado's medical aid in dying law, or voluntarily stopping eating and drinking as a way to hasten death. And so I'm working up with a woman right now who is terminally ill. She will be coming into my home to transition, or for the viewers, to die. We're a right to die state. So there's policies and procedures. If you qualify, you can obtain medications to drink a cocktail that will stop your heart and end your life. And so right now I'm trying to throw her a Kentucky Derby party, because when I asked her, I said, hey, and I'm just going to make up a name. I said, hey, Rebecca, why have you chosen May as your death day, as your death month? And she said, because I want to see the Kentucky Derby one more time. And so I get to jump into these situations where I'm currently working on Kentucky Derby tickets, because I said, hey, can I get you on a plane? Let's get you on a plane to the Kentucky Derby one last time. She'll be dying the next week. And so these are the things that I do. I throw fundraisers and opportunities for people to dive in to learn about death and dying, all through the lens of being autonomous. And, Rashad and Jake, I want you and your families and the people that you love, and including yourselves, to be able to have control in your death and what that may look like, to be out of pain and out of fear, to have your questions answered, and to have your legacy preserved for the dignity of what you've done and what you've created and what you continue to do. Because when you stop breathing, we have to rely on our communities to really keep the spirit alive. It's all these things we've said, right? Keep the spirit alive. It takes a village to raise a child. And let me tell you, it's not a village to raise a child. It takes a village to be a human. We rely on one another to be and to flourish even as adults. So that's how I got here. I'm 34. I'll be 35 this year. And I have no idea when I'm in my mid 40s. I'm like, if I'm here now, I'm going to be opening up a green conservation space in the Carolinas. I recently found out my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather were cemetery keepers in Ohio. Wow. I have documentation of their job cards from the late 1800s and early 1900s. This is in my blood, literally. And so that's kind of where I got to, I do all the things, I've really seen it all. And that's why when I tell people, this isn't hearsay, I've seen this with my eyes. I've experienced this. I've lived through this. I've witnessed the heartbreak. And I can be a testament to why we should visit the idea of death and our own deaths in order to live and bloom and be in love.
Wow. That is you said a lot there, and so many interesting things that you said. I want to talk about one of the things you're talking about when you're talking about the composting for a body. So, say I pass away and I want to have your kind of, or just kind of a composting more natural way instead of being put into a casket. How would something like that go? Is that kind of what you do, right?
So I don't physically do that myself. I work with other business providers along the Front Range that provide those literal services. I work with the end product, the soil per se. And so, a lot of these people are saying, oh, look at all this new technology and things like that. And I think what we're getting back to is just a more dignified way to return people to the earth. And so human composting happens in a controlled environment. It's generally in a warehouse, and the decedent or the dead body is put into a vessel of sorts, a very large vessel, and it's mixed with a soil enzyme and different plant materials. It can be hay. It can even be some native plants as well, such as yarrow. And over the course of 3 months, bodies decompose pretty quickly when their temperatures are a little bit higher than chilly, we'll say. But over the course of 3 months, the body becomes this beautiful nutrient-dense soil, similar to compost in our gardens when we put banana peels or apple peels or eggshells out there. And what you're left with is this beautiful soil. And then you separate that from the skeleton, because the skeleton's a bit more difficult to decompose. As you can imagine, when we find bones that can be from hundreds of years ago, if not thousands of years ago. So after that process is completed in a controlled environment, the skeleton is separated and it's pulverized or blended into a powder, put back into the soil for 1 more month usually. And so it's about a 4-month process. And you have about a truck bed full of soil at the end of the process. And that's human composting. It's only legal in a handful of states here in the United States, which is heartbreaking to think that choices of composting your body are not approachable unless you ship yourself over state lines, which can be very expensive and traumatizing for families sometimes. So that's a little bit about human compost. It's something that's really picking up steam, and people are starting to look at legislation and lobbying towards making this approachable and legal in all of the 50 states.
That's fascinating. You're taking what is normally a morbid thought of death and skeletons and caskets and stuff and turning it into a beautiful, rich soil that can go back into the earth. And I'm fascinated by that. And I'm also, we're getting into it before I think some of our listeners may not even understand when you say like your right to die, and some of these states that are natural burial states where other places you don't have this opportunity or this choice. So can you explain, like, I guess what the typical death looks like, as far as like, we all kind of know you die, the people die, they go to the morgue, tell us about that so that we can kind of understand where you're trying to shift this inevitable thing called death to a better way to transition into the next life.
Certainly. I would say 100% of the time I ask an audience or a group, do you know somebody or have you ever known anybody in your life who has suffered from dementia or cancer? Jake and Rashad, do you know anybody with cancer or dementia, or have you known somebody with dementia or cancer? Most of the time, I would say it's 100% of the time people say yes. And so when we can take ourselves there, we can begin to take a few steps back and saying, okay, if the worst happens, how can I be prepared to make sure that my fears are addressed? And for me, I don't want to be in pain. And I don't want to be hooked up to artificial means of hydration or nutrition. And in order for me to have that legally respected, it's important for me to have legal documents. Because if we got into a situation where maybe my family is fighting, or maybe my mom wants one thing and my dad wants another, or my partner this or my partner that, or my kids this or my kids that, it can get really hairy. Meanwhile, I'm I'm going through the process. And so the right to die in Colorado specifically states that you must have a terminal illness of 6 months or less. You're 18 or older and of sound mind, and you can make your choices. And there's a few other things as well. And basically that means you can go through a process to get those medications. And people are like, well, that's not for me. And I'm like, okay, but the reality is dis-ease, we say it quickly, disease is more of a possibility for the way that you're going to die than it is probably not. I would like to die of natural causes. What that looks like for me is probably in my sleep. I told my mom months ago, I said, ideally I'm gardening and I just die. Like you just find me out like keeled over in my raspberry bushes. I'm not ready yet, but that would be ideal. But from what I hear, that doesn't happen, but very rarely. In fact, I'm curious about the statistics around that. And so knowing what I know and being able to share with people and encourage them to say, hey, look, so if you get dementia, are you okay with being sedated for maybe 15 years in a facility or a community where you actually don't know your name, you're not aware of your surroundings, someone has to feed you, and you're on medications just so that you can be kept at a low, functioning rate so that you're not stressed and anxious? And most people say, no, I don't want that. So then what's your choice? What do you want to do? I want to have choice. Maybe that is a path. But I also would like an opportunity to say, you know what? If I can't feed myself and I can't hydrate myself and I'm confused, just keep me comfortable. Don't feed me. Don't hydrate me. Just make sure I have morphine. Make sure I have lorazepam, and make sure I have haloperidol. Those are the 3 drugs I need in order to be kept comfortable until I, in theory, stop living because of what we can make sense of in this terms of starvation. It's not cruel, because in my sound mind, and as I state to you right now, that's what I want. Now, when we have these dis-eases where our brains can't cognitively function as they used to, we may say different things because we're confused and we're not clear on what's going on. And so what I believe is that if we can honor people when they're of sound mind and brain and educating them ahead of time, hey, this is what it can look like. And I'll tell you what, sometimes it's too late. You can't do anything. And families, most of the time, aren't set up to be able to caregive 24/7. It's a lot of work, and it's extremely emotional, physical taxing, emotionally taxing, all of the things. And so what I do is I just tell people and I encourage them to think about all of these things. Well, if these could be the possibilities of your life, what's your plan? And so in these situations, once a body dies or once a person dies, you're really looking at what they planned ahead of time or not. And if you're not, grief can be compounded pretty significantly because a family in this moment of grief is trying to make all these choices to honor the person who died, who made no plans. Oh, I think they would have wanted this. They would have wanted this. No, they wouldn't. They would have wanted this. When we can plan ahead of time, it's like the last gift we can give. Jake wanted this. He wrote all this out. We talked about it. We laughed about it. We even said we were going to play this song. You know, my mom says, when I die, paint eyes on my eyelids so people still think I'm alive. And I know beyond any reason of a doubt, if her head is still intact, because I don't know how she'll die, and that's the reality of it, right? It sounds crazy. I'm going to paint eyelids on my mother's eyes, or eyes on my mother's eyelids. And, you know, that's fun. And that's a fun way to grieve and move through this process. Whereas if she's never shared any of those things, she dies suddenly, and then we're like, well, shoot, what did she want? We know the things that brought her love. And so I encourage people to think about it the whole step of the way. Are you okay with thinking about your family member in refrigeration? And they say, well, what do you mean? And I say, well, you join the queue when you die. When you die, if you're going to be embalmed, you only get embalmed once they have the time to embalm you and process or care for your body after you die. So you go to refrigeration, and people forget to consider that every day you're in refrigeration is a line item on the invoice that you get. And if you want to visit your loved one, if you want to go see them and spend time with them, that's another line item that you're getting invoiced for. Weekends are surcharges. So if you want to spend time with your loved one or they die on the weekend and you have to go see them on the weekend to identify their body, you're going to get surcharged. there's a lot of things people don't think about, or say, I never even thought about that. Dead bodies are safe. I encourage everyone to consider keeping their loved ones at home or bringing them home. And people will say, well, what am I going to do with a dead body? Well, you don't have to do anything weird. Just make sure they have a comfortable spot to lay. Make sure you have ice packs on the thicker, meatier parts of their body, their back of their head, their torso. And you can keep a body safely in your home for a few days while honoring that individual. I've been getting into the pet space as well. And I've had so many people say to me, when I can spend time with my dead pet or my dead relative, it feels different than once they die within an hour, the morgue comes and picks them up and takes them away. And by the way, they have to zip their head up before they close the door and the vehicle pulls out of the driveway. And so your loved one who is just maybe alive and just took their last breaths are now being zipped up into a plastic bag and put into the back of a van. And people say, so what do you do? And I say, please don't zip up that bag. And they're going to go out the way that they came in. And there's all sorts of different ways. And you can see these people who are just workers. They're just transporters. All they do is transport bodies all day long. They kind of look at me for a minute and they're like, I never even thought about the dignity of having their face unzipped until we got into the car, and all of these types of things. So that's kind of what I do, is just kind of encourage people to think about that. And sometimes it's hard. So step away from that, take a few breaths, or carry on your day in a different direction, but visit it again. Visit it again, because we have relatives. Some of us have parents. Some of us have partners. And guess what? Kids die too. Some of us have kids. So how can we at least begin to visit those in a rational mindset, so that if it comes before for some of us, but when it comes for the others, because it's a when, not if, then we can be prepared. We can say, oh, I talked to that crazy guy, Eric Rooney, and I'm going to ask him for resources. Or, I'm working with a lot of men in this men's space, because that's a whole separate talk for the emotional boundaries and obstacles we face in expressing and releasing our emotions through grief and death. And it's really beautiful to see that when I think we can visit our own things, we almost become humbled. We almost become, it's like, whoa, okay, check yourself. I'm going to die too. So how am I showing up and stepping into love today? How am I showing up and saying, I'm sorry, I brought my shit into this and it wasn't about me. How can I make that phone call again? I end every call with my brothers. I'm like, hey, I love you. And they're always like, bro, I love you too.
Love you too, bro.
You're going to make sure you know it, because die. And these are the things that we should be laughing about and enjoying. But I love the questions, because I think they're so pure. I just wrote a post about it on LinkedIn. Like, the questions I get around death are usually just so pure. Where do I go after what happens? You go to a refrigerator, a very large refrigerator. They tie a tag on your toe. They really do. Or on the outside of your bag, and both sometimes. And until they can process or care for your body, dependent on what your choices were, you stay there and you wait.
Yeah. This is the uncomfortable part, right? This is the uncomfortable stuff I mentioned, but making it like death positive, you're bringing it into a positive light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Eric, I used to work in a hospital as a security guard, and part of my job as a security guard was to do what the pathologist did once they left at 5 o'clock, which is to put the bodies in and out of the morgue, and to, help that transition between them and the mortician. And when I first started working, I was fresh out of college, but when I first started working at the hospital, I've never seen death like that. Like I've been to funerals and things like that, but I've never seen a fresh dead body. I've never seen someone take their last breath. I never, was like, I used to have to go into the room and get the person's belongings and log them into the security. And then they were alive and I'm talking to them. And the next thing you know, I'm putting that same person into what was called room 10. And, they were just gone. And I always found it troubling to put that warm body, because the back is the last to lose heat, and you're feeling that warm body go into that freezer, the refrigerator, and it's just like it always gave me the eerie feeling. So my question to you is, what was that transition like to be able to stare death in the face and not let it stay on you heavy like it used to stay on me, because there was a transition for me where I got used to it a little bit, and that's when I knew it was time for me to go. But what was that like for you?
Wow. What a beautiful question. And you're right. You shouldn't be used to it. And this is why I'm having an event in April for healthcare workers to say, just because you're a ICU nurse or just because you're a ER doctor doesn't mean that you should be expected to see these traumatic deaths all the time and then just clock out and deal with your families and friends on the weekend.
Right.
What are the ways we're supporting the people who are seeing death all the time? And for me, something out of this world, Rashad, I just did it. I just knew that these people needed somebody to be there with them, so that they wouldn't be dying alone. And I just jumped right in when the family was scared and bringing their own baggage into it, and there needed to be some opportunity of peace in the room. I just jumped right in. And for me, I think these are the things where it's like, maybe I do have to remind myself a little bit more that I am courageous. And also, I believe we all have that capability to do that and to look at death in the eyes. And what I actually feel in this too is a little bit of sadness creeping in, because if we were more engaged with our elders and our family and our immediate community, death would be more at the center, just like it is in some of these cultural holidays like Dia de los Muertos, where you're calling in your ancestors around these holidays, where you're inviting them back in as an opportunity. And for us, it's like they're dead, they're still warm, but then you put them in the freezer, and it's like, it probably didn't sit right with you because it wasn't dignified, and it just didn't feel like dignity. It was just once they're dead, they lose their name and they become a number. They become a number, just like I heard you say. And so I believe that if we were more involved in our community, more involved with our neighbors who need help, more involved with volunteering at our local hospice communities and assisted living communities, which I visit regularly. I not only run and have founded a nonprofit, I volunteer at a lot here in the Front Range. If we are more involved, then we could probably shift this narrative that, hey, Susan in room 2 really wanted to make sure that her body could come to room temperature before we moved her into refrigeration. So we're going to leave her in there for the night and set up a beautiful altar with candles and flowers. And we're going to allow everybody here, because she doesn't have family, to visit throughout the night instead of whisking her away so quickly so we can fill the spot. It's these types of things. But, in these moments of what we're told to do, and especially with a dead body, are they going to leak? That's a real question. Yeah. Are they going to start turning into this thing that we see in Hollywood movies of like guts and gore and green slime and weird ooze? And no, you're not. And most of the time, bodies, we always have this thing of like bodies poop and pee after they die, right? All of your bowels relax and you release everything. Has that happened in my experience? Yes. Would I say that is the normal? No. I mean, of course it depends on what they ate, but at the end of the day, we have such wildly wrong ideas around death and dying because, like you said, we didn't see it. And then we work these jobs or we get into these experiences where we see it and it rubs us the wrong way. And we shouldn't get used to the inhumane treatment of people's legacy at all, no matter if it's just a physical body or whatever. And that opens the question of like, what do we do with people who don't have the funds to have a dignified death? Or what do we do with the people who don't have the funds to even be in a home and they're found dead on the streets? How are we making sure that those are dignified processes here in our state, but not only Denver, Colorado, but also San Francisco and LA and Chicago and New York and Miami and Dallas and a lot of spaces where we can witness some of these things and some of these problems. We focus on the living, but we forget about the dead.
Yeah. I've go ahead, Jake.
No, I'm just, it's phenomenal. You're working with, you mentioned terminally ill people with 6 months to live or less. But you've also done some work with people that are wanting to have an autonomous controlled transition, which is a whole nother like aspect of the freedom we should have as our human rights. And so I don't know if you feel comfortable, if you'd like to kind of speak a little bit about that like this whole process and what you're doing and trying to accomplish is like almost getting our rights back when we die, so that when we do transition, we're not just like at the expense of anybody else who wants to make anything for us. But not just terminally, or you actually have worked with, a young lady. If you don't mind speaking a little bit about that and just what that experience was like.
Thank you. And I'm sharing this person's story, and I will continue to share it at the full pardoning and approval of the individual. We've had many lengthy conversations while they were here on this planet physically about how I could continue their legacy through the lens of having choice and autonomy. And so, I look at this, I guess I'll have to say this S word, which a lot of us are familiar with, and it's suicide. And yesterday, even, I was thinking, what does the word mean? I want to know what the word means. If I'm going to hear it and it moves me, it kind of takes my breath away when I hear it. I'm like, like, oh my gosh, because we hear committed suicide. We hear these things that almost cast this negative shadow about autonomy and life on individuals who were in a space of reason and clarity to transition out of here. And I'm not saying that's the disclaimer for everybody, but so I look at, all of these situations and I look at what autonomy is, and autonomy is, I think, choosing through sound mind and logical reasoning and thinking and community resources and support. I believe in the ability to live or not. I believe that is choice, because I believe autonomy encompasses it all of it, which is inclusive of choosing when to transition out of here, out of this life, choosing when you want to die. And I don't believe that should be being forced to necessarily destroy or dismember or make incomplete this temple, because I think in many spaces that's the only thing that we can provide. Don't kill yourself, do this. Don't kill yourself, do this. Instead of saying, how's your heart? Where is this coming from? And I want to let you know I love you so much, and I respect all of your choices, and you've brought so much light to my life. This was part of our conversation I've been having. We want to jump in and say, don't do it. Don't kill yourself. And we have these hotlines that you can call because we're so quick to just say, don't do it. But what about the quality of life? What about investigating and honoring what that person is feeling? A disclaimer, I'm not saying that this is an end all be all, no necessarily pun intended. What I'm saying is it's a space to get curious about, because we put so much shame on the S word, when I believe all of human beings experience suicidal ideation. This idea of what it would be like if I didn't live here, what it would be like if I'm done and I'm not here. And most of us have resources where we can bring ourselves back to say, I didn't feel plugged in there, and I was low. I was really low, and I'm so thankful I've been learning these tools to get me back up to feeling like it's lovely being here. But in the case that doesn't exist, in the case of many years, like this individual I'm going to tell you about, I believe in choice. And let it be known, this isn't a situation I jumped into. It was a situation that I had much time to integrate, to converse with the individual, and to get a background on where they were. And they were somebody who wasn't deemed terminally ill. They were somebody who was, on many cases, seemingly healthy and aging. They weren't over the age of 60. And they approached me about holding space for them as they chose to transition out of here. And this individual had plans to go to Switzerland, because in Switzerland, there are laws and regulations where you can make choices that are much more autonomous than the United States of America. And unfortunately, they weren't able to take advantage of Switzerland's laws. And so they contacted me and they said, hey, Eric, are you aware of any ways that I could approach medical aid in dying? And unfortunately, they weren't, because they are not terminally ill. They did not meet the qualifications needed in order to qualify for medical aid in dying in a lot of the different ways. And so they said the only way I can do this is to stop eating and drinking. And so I put on my support hat in the space of, this isn't about me and my choice. This is about honoring that person and what their choice is. And over the course of many months, we worked together to understand, and also with that person's medical power of attorney. I worked alongside the individual and their medical durable power of attorney so that there was a clear plan, that it was safe, that it was legal, and that it was all about the individual and their choice. They stopped eating and drinking as a way to hasten death. And on the morning of the 15th day, their heart stopped, and they transitioned out of this life into the next. And so when I look at these things, and I'm often asked, how do you navigate that emotionally? And it really is reminding myself that all I did was give them a letter of care and a space of care. I didn't make any choices for them. I didn't do anything that they didn't want to do. And all I did was make sure that they were safe as they made a safe choice and an autonomous and clear choice to transition out of this space into the next. And so we have this book of supposed tos, right? Oh, you're not supposed to die young. Babies aren't supposed to die. Kids aren't supposed to die. Teenagers aren't supposed to die. Oh, you just got married. You're not supposed to die. And there is no book that exists of such. Kids do die. Young people die. People die in joyous moments of their life. And so what I can say with that is we can shift of how we live in love. And it's not something to get sad about, but it's something to hold in the same hand of the realities of life. Is there's always that potential. I don't have to buy the new whatever is coming out or whatever, but I am going to die. And so how can I at least continue to hold that in as the reality? Same as the all human emotions, right? We're going to experience those. How can I hold that into the same bowl? And how can I also put myself, it's right, empathy, put myself into their shoes? What if for 3 years I woke up every day knowing I had completed everything in my life, and I was at peace and joyous with this idea of getting closer and closer to my transition? I think that's kind of beautiful, and being so clear in a way. There is a little bit of heartbreak in there too, because that's the ageist that slides into us. Well, they had so much life, or they had so much possibility and potential, and that's selfish. That's just my perspective on what they had. But when you sat down and listened to, and when I've sat down and listened to many individuals, it's really beautiful and it's really clear and it's almost meditative and centered. I'm complete and I'm ready to go, which I think is beautiful. And it's a very humbling experience. And thank you for allowing me to share that story. And they wanted me to talk about it to empower people that, through certain spaces, and many years of understanding, there should be a safe space and opportunity for people to have choice and autonomy.
Wow, that's amazing.
You're amazing. Yeah.
So through my experience and being there a few times when people have passed on and transitioned on, not all transitions, I mean, they're not the same. Sometimes you see people, I've seen people go into it and just kind of like roll into it nice and easy. But I've seen a couple times people kicking and screaming, talking about they don't want to die and those kind of things. And it kind of left an impression on me a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like hearing somebody like when you hear somebody scream that they don't want to die and they're dying and, it's death is on them, death is on them. It kind of rattles you different inside. You know what I'm saying? There's a part of me that was just kind of rattled by it. My question is, what is your transitions like? And has there been transitions where thought they were ready to go, but then as it got closer, they got afraid and was trying to, they made it difficult for themselves?
When people say I'm afraid or use the word scared, I like to, again, just get curious. And I think anyone that says, oh, I'm not afraid to die, I'm like, you're a liar. It's not that you're not afraid, or it's not that I'm not afraid, or any of those types of things. But I think we could say, I'm really curious what it is like for my heart to stop, because like I'm not afraid, but there's parts of me where I'm like, oh, that feels a little bit uncomfortable for me to like think about or sit with all the time. And so I've witnessed some things that have really pulled at my heartstrings, we'll say, because, and this opens a conversation and doors to many different things. But in my experience, and I can think of many experiences, how specifically how religion has made people scared about what death can look like, in accordance to the way that they've lived their life. And so I think the more scared somebody is, the more resistance there is. And so as a death doula, I bring in so many different ways. Do you want your priest in here? Do you need some type of pastor or member to kind of get in here to support you with any type of your religious or spiritual beliefs? But I can think of one case that I'll share with you. A man who is terminal as we speak, and I asked him, I as a seemingly healthy young man would like to ask you questions. Are you comfortable with me asking you some questions? I always say that, and he said, yes, you can ask me anything. And I said, are you afraid to die? And he said, yes. And I said, why? Because I think I'm going to go to hell. He identifies as gay and grew up in a very religious household. And for me, that's heartbreaking to think this person who I've gotten to know, whom is, I don't know that well, but I can feel how beautiful they are, is afraid to die because of this preconceived notion that they're going to suffer in hell. And that's when I've seen resistance to death. And that's when I've seen this struggle to relax into death. And that's when I see labored breathing. And that's when I see days of suffering because people can't let go. And that's why I work with plant medicines. And that's why I work with all sorts of practitioners who can introduce different ways of releasing emotional blockages, be it something that is traumatic or something that has been instilled on you because you are maybe still religious, and that's okay. And also, I don't want you to die fearing that you're going to hell. And so what can we do? And what are you as the dying individual open to? And so I've seen a little bit of it all. And I think in the few incidences I've seen it through medical aid in dying, it's been young people who feel that their lives are incomplete and they had a lot more to do, but their bodies are giving up through their disease. And so there's a lot of emotional release in the days leading up to when they take their medications. And there's a lot of love and beauty in that too. And there's a lot of things that allow me to wake up every day and have this gratitude practice and this perspective that I do, is because I see it. But I would say also, with all of that said, at the time of death, when they're taking their last breaths, there's a release and a peace. And I would say 100% of the individuals that I've doulaed through death, I have felt and witnessed peace in those moments leading up to their last breath and afterwards as well. 100% of the times. It took a little bit to get there. I've had families leave because they can't witness their loved one drinking these cocktails to end their life, and that's their business. My job is to make sure the safe is space and held reverently. And it's tough, it's tough through tragedies, and it's tough through individuals who live in that fear of maybe being in eternal suffering. And there's no way I can make them feel different. I can just do everything I can to give them tools that may allow them that. The other story I'm thinking of off my mind right now, which is absolutely heart-wrenching, is an individual I'm working with right now. It's the same individual who's going to the Kentucky Derby, I hope. I said to her, "Are you scared to die?" And she said, "No, but I've been really sad." And I said, "Well, why are you sad?" And she said, "Because I can't cry. I can't cry." And I said, "Do you want to cry?" And she said, "I do." And What I do know is her medications are preventing her from having that emotional release. She almost gets there, but her medications just don't allow her to have that dump, that cry, that wailing of I'm dying and this is sad.
Yeah.
And so what I'm working with right now is being able to get her Reiki, get her different opportunities to have these energy flows opened up. And I always ask them, is this something you're open to? Are you open to body work? Are you open to family constellation work? Are you open to investigating and trying everything? And she looked at me, and you would have thought, I brought in a whole room of horses because she loves horses. And all I did was listen to what her needs are and make a suggestion as to how we can help. And so I think that's going to help. I think in some cases it could be really tough for her to get really close to at the end of her days. But as we put these tools in place as a human being, I really think we're going to get to a place here soon where she can exhale and say, thank you. Now, in many ways, I wish we could whisk her out of her assisted living community and offer her a psilocybin journey, which I think would be tremendously beneficial for a lot of different cases, because I've seen it. I've read the studies. I've partaken in a lot of these different scenarios and panels. And but unfortunately, there's other ways that we can do, which I think will allow her to release that emotional blockage and to maybe not be so scared like you've witnessed in your experience, or not so expressive through that fear, we'll say. Because I think it's natural to be curious or scared a little bit, at least.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's the how of the dying that we
Right.
don't know. I have to reference my uncle, Norman Davis, who just passed about a month ago. Blues DJ, radio DJ for 70 plus years, San Fran, like early on in the 60s, tripped on psilocybin and acid 30 days straight on the air. Like, this guy was a pioneer in the radio industry, and he just recently passed. The last day of his life, he produced his last radio show, a blues show for Radio Boise. He was excited about starting a podcast at 88 years old. And he went to sleep that night and never woke up. And on his face in the morgue, my cousin and aunt told me he had a little grin on his face. And so you mentioned, like, could you go die in your sleep? And like, he did. He found peace in the most peaceful space and possibility that you could. I want to reference peace. And I think, we opened with saying this is going to be uncomfortable. And it has been uncomfortable to hear these stories. But when I see you, Eric, you're in such a peaceful state, yet you're walking people home, and I can't help but think you're taking on a lot as you do this. I mean, you're there as a bystander, as a facilitator, as a listener, as a questioner, as like helping them. What do you do to help yourself post, the drink's done and this now is on? Like, what do you do for yourself to remain in this like peaceful space that allows you to continue to do this, so phenomenal, the work you're doing?
Yeah. It's very simple. And that is saying fuck you, or fuck the idea of self-care Saturday, because life should be self-care. Every day should be self-care, and how you show up. And so that's the first thing, is saying, I'm not going to just show up for myself when this is done. I'm not going to just show up for myself next Thursday when I can fly to the Caribbean and spend a week in the whatever. I'm going to make sure that I have things every day. And that's water, making sure my water, number one, that I'm putting into my body is pure and healthy, and nutrition. And the other things are just really beautiful. Advocating for what I need, plugging in a lot of these resources. I love body work. I love connecting with people. Truly being able to do something like this, So psychologically, I'm going to try to explain this, but so a lot of times when I'm done with a process, I get frustrated only at the fact that this isn't just the norm. And so that's where I get stuck in self-care.
Yeah.
But then when I have platforms like this, and to be able to work alongside y'all, to be able to get the word out and talk about this in spaces like this, I can kind of break through the stagnation of this kind of that emotional stuckage afterwards. And I'm like, I know exactly why I'm doing this again. And so I do all the things of self-care. I make sure that I'm surrounded by good people. I make sure that I'm constantly getting exercise, making sure I'm getting good sleep, making sure that I'm doing all of those things. I'm being gentle on myself. And if I am nature too, then we have cycles, right? We have these things that we go through as human beings. So I would say my breath work specifically has really changed my life. A relationship with water. And then I would say the number one biggest thing is my relationship with the earth. Um, when I work with a family or I work in a situation that where I need to maybe then fill up my cup a little bit and I can get my hands into the dirt, I can go tend to my plants, I can go lay on my couch and just stare at these large leaves with these lights on them. It's the simple things that I kind of think fill me back up. And we hear these things like, you do good, you get good. I get good. I really get good. She is so good to me that I'm taken care of in a lot of ways. I have really radical, cool people. I have so many things that I'm creating on the back end of these things that really just like empower me from not only like empowerment standpoint, but opportunities of like complete world change. I'm developing a product right now that doesn't exist. There's nothing on the market. And so it's these types of things where I'm like, they're gentle reminders like, you got it, Eric, you've got it. You can do this again. Because no matter how much I look for external validation, at the end of the day, this is the most sobering truth. We have to have us.
Yeah.
You gotta have yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta be taking care of yourself first. And this is what I tell family members as they're caring for their loved ones. You can show up all day long with all the food and all the things and all the da 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 da. But how are you? How are you taking care of your husband who's dying of cancer? How are you taking care of your mom who's dying of dementia? Are you making sure you're getting good sleep and nutrition? Because you can't. No matter how much you love them, we have a physical body that has to be taken care of. We have a physical body that no matter what we want to do, it reacts and responds to damage and stress and all of these other types of things. And so making sure I can set those boundaries, and I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at saying, you know what? I am going to do this today, or I am going to do that today. As soon as we get off here, I'm going into my backyard. I'm going to take off my shirt and I'm going to let the sun hit my chest for 30 minutes while I just look at it with some sunglasses on, take my sunglasses off, put them back on, take them off. I'm going to pet my dogs. I'm going to walk around my garden to see what's sprouting as a sign of spring, because that's inside me too. My body's happening right now too. We should be drinking everything bitter right now to start moving the stagnation of our lymphatic system, our circulatory system, get everything moving. Like, we are nature. So let's do and let's mimic that. And so self-care is founded in the basic things: water, good nutrition, and people. Sharing and seeing other people get excited about this. And it's all the most simple things. And I look at kids, I look at my nephews. I have 4 nephews and a niece, and they are an inspiration, allow me to look at this space too, because let's play. Let's run around this world in awe and curiosity. Let's throw a fit when we have to be put back into the car at the end of the night and the night's over because it's time for bed. I want to do those types of things. I want to wake up in the morning and, Jake, I think, I don't know if we've had the privilege of being in spaces together and, and playing in those other ways. But when we wake up in the morning and we leave these spaces of gatherings, it's so sad to leave. And I never want them to end. And that's what the real thing is. And that's why we look at kids as this light. And so the self-care comes down to all of those simple things. Stop and play, drink some good water, get some good food, and love. Get out there, see the world, share stories, cry, travel, make mistakes, be sad, those types of things, and get your feet and your hands into Mama Earth.
Beautifully said.
I love that. Let me, so part of my experience and what I've witnessed is that, when I've seen people pass on, they've always passed on. They have like their mouth like a choir boy, like they're singing, almost as if like the soul has left the body, right? And you can kind of see, like, watching somebody that was alive 5 seconds ago and watching when they just passed. There's a remarkable difference. It almost looks as if like they're like a wax figure, like instantly. It's crazy how that happens. So my question is, have you have have any of your people you work with, have they told you about like what they've dreamed, what was coming, and what after this, and have you had any experiences where you kind of got signs that maybe they're giving you like a nod to say what's up?
Certainly. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's like people always say, "Have you seen a ghost?" And I'm like, what's a ghost? Something that you can't explain energetically? Then yeah, tons of them. Or like a person in a white sheet walking around saying like boo and trying to scare you. Like, what is a ghost? Is fun, but also yeah. And I think one story in particular, it was the day before this individual died. He was laying in bed and he was smiling, and it's very angelic, really. Sometimes it's looking around, sometimes they'll even turn their heads, and it's almost like they're looking at somebody that just walked through the door, but no, the door didn't open. They're, in my translation, being greeted by something, and they always feel good. It's never like you would see the furrowing of the brows, you would see scared. It's always peaceful. Well, the day before this, Roger died last March. The day before Roger died, he was just laying in bed, and he got this big smile on his face, and it was just me and Roger. And he held up his hand. He said, "Hey, Andrew." And I looked, and no one was there. And I was like, "Who's Andrew?"
Wow.
And Roger just looked at me and was like, and that was it. And this was, somebody who is a Vietnam vet, ex-football player, and he was a little bit more rugged, a little bit more masculine. And it was so beautiful with him and I being able to connect because it was extremely intimate. I was bathing his body. I was, making sure he was hygienically clean everywhere. And so for 2 weeks, I cared for him because, it was different. He didn't want his daughter down by his bits or whatever. And so it was so beautiful that I was able to kind of come in, break down the barriers of kind of like this rigid masculinity. And then just before he transitioned, he was being greeted by somebody named Andrew, who clearly he was excited to see. And it's things like that. There's another woman, she loved giraffes. And I said to her before she died, I was like, she was a very practicing Christian woman. And so some of these conversations got very interesting, just as far as I was like, well, where do you think you're going? Where are you going to, what's going on? And she was like, well, I don't know. And I was like, all right, well, will you do your best to at least give me a sign that you made it for wherever you were going? And she's like, we'll see. And I was like, okay. And so fast forward a few months, and I'm having a grief memorial ceremony at my farm. And there's a woman that walks into the grief ceremony, and she has like a hair barrette in, and it's all giraffes. And I'm like, I've never seen anything like that before. I've never seen a barrette made out of like giraffes. And I was like, all right, Irene, I see you, girl. Things like, and this is where, we say everything happens for a reason, but I have no doubt in my mind that these are some of the things that have taken place. The woman's story that I shared with you earlier, I have texts from her. I was reading them last night, and she said to me, I don't know where I'm going to end up, but I'll do whatever I can to bring you peace from the other side. And I was like, all right, so I have so many people that are just kind of on my side in these magical, spiritual, ineffable ways that we can't necessarily say in this language. But I do believe in angels. I do believe in these spiritual guides. I do believe in ancestor support. I do believe in God. I do believe in love and happiness. All these things are totally real because it's all founded on one thing, and it's just love. And I believe love is real. And so, there's all sorts of mysteries of what lies ahead. And, it begs to the question of is that just the DMT that our brain is releasing? Because, this is what people are saying, or is this actually something else that's happening? Are we really on this thread of something else going on here? Or, it opens up the conversation to say, like you shared with the spirit in the mouth. Somebody last night at dinner proposed a question. Do you have a different spiritual journey if you take medications to end your life than you do of natural causes, or if you do of dying of disease, or if you do of dying in a tragic car wreck, or if you do in a skiing accident, or if you do from a spinal injury? There's so many things that we just don't know, that they're fun to just be curious about. And I think that's why I say, if you say you're not scared, then that's just silly, because it's like, well, what if, and where, and how? And I can't remember my previous lives. I don't know if either of you can, if you believe in that. But so I don't think if we go somewhere else, which I think we do, then I don't think we're going to remember anything. And that's kind of
Yeah.
sad. I'm like, I
Yeah.
kind of remember, I want to remember Eric Rooney.
Yeah.
Like, I want to look back and be like, he was so cool in Colorado, and now we're on planet whatever or
Yeah.
whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So something's going on. It's peaceful. It's a lot of love. And yeah, I'm into near-death experiences now too. And I met a paraglider last night who was in a coma for 3 days. And he was telling me, he was like, I really like being here, but over there, he was like, the most peace and love you've ever felt. You can't even explain it. And I've met mothers who were didn't want to even come back to their children in their death, and then the entity was like, "You are not done here," and then they're like, and they're waking back up in the hospital, and now they're functioning and thriving, and so it's just so curious, bizarre, wild, exciting. And it's fun to play with, to answer your question along roundabout ways.
Yeah.
I can only assume it's good, and I hope that I have animals and people too that are greeting me when it's time for me to transition, because I love dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like you say like a lot of people don't appreciate life till they have a near-death experience or experience death, and like I feel like what a gift you have created for yourself to experience this in your line of your duty to the humanity, to be this peaceful, loving presence. You get to see it and see the beauty of it. So it also kind of makes you appreciate now and what we're in right now. And I can feel that. And I hope our
That's why I'm like, cut the
listeners-
bullshit, you guys.
Yeah.
Let's play. Like, cut it out. Let's have
Straight
fun. Let's
up.
do this.
Joy. Get the joy molecule going. And, we're all going to face that final day or final breath. And, but yeah, you just seem to embody like presence now, living, love, life, and enjoyment. And that's, what an awesome way to live, man.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
why- yeah.
So you talked about plant medicine and you potentially using it for your patients and helping them with that transition. Through my plant medicine experience, I've had some amazing journeys where I often revisit them back over and over again, because one of the things for me is that having that experience in the hospital and just seeing death like that, I wanted to be comfortable with letting go, right? But there's nothing that can get you comfortable for ultimately letting go. But I feel like with the practice of plant medicine, you get the sense of learning how to just go into that space, relax, and let go. Have you, in your experience of plant medicine, have you felt that space where you feel as if like, there may be, that's where maybe, people may be going afterwards, like that singularity, that feeling of just that oneness that sometimes you feel when you're on plant medicine?
Not completely. I think it can be similar, and I think it's a story to use to relate to maybe the potential. But I think something's different. And I think there's no way to experience it until you do. And plant medicine is a wonderful tool, I think, to work with potential fears or obstructions or obstacles in getting there. I think it's a continuation. It's like always getting better, always getting there, always thinking about it. And yeah, I think it's tremendously beneficial. I know darn well that I would not be where I am right now without plant medicine, period. Um, and that's not to say that like, I'm taking massive hero doses all the time. I'm very particular about what types of medicines I will work with, and I'm very particular about the healers or the situations that I'm involved with. And so it's not to say that it's just like, oh, if you take plant medicine, you're gonna have a great relationship with death. There's a lot of things to factor in,
Right.
but I do know that I am here in partnership with plant medicine. No doubt. No doubt. I'm still here on the planet because of plant medicine. No doubt.
What a beautiful thing it is, plants and nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole topic is something for me that is such a great interest of mine, because I've always I keep death in the forefront of my mind, not in a sick, morbid way, but just as as something as I'm just so curious about it, and it's something that I think about often. Um, I've I've never heard of someone who does quite what you do, and I feel it's very interesting. I feel like it's something that tremendous amount of people can get a lot of help from, uh, and I feel like it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, because even just talking about this topic, it's something very uncomfortable. But when you release yourself from the fear and the mystery of what death is, then it allows you to live in this extra gear. And I can see you're in that extra gear. You know what I'm saying? It allows you to live from such a pure place of understanding the gift that you have, which is this time that we often take for granted. So I mean,
The heightened awareness.
it's just a wonderful thing, yeah, and awareness in general, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I go ahead, Jake.
No, you
Rashad,
go.
I just really quick, I think it's beautiful to hear your reflection on that too, because clearly you are on this journey of understanding and looking at the tools that you have available to you as well, and holding death at the forefront. It's so important. It's so important, and it's not morbid and weird. It's actually a healthy, rational. It's a healthy way to go about life, is understanding how precious it is, and that is death. There's no difference between being born and dying. It's just right now.
Right. Ooh,
Man,
that's deep. That's deep.
This has been really amazing, Eric, and I hate to have to do this, but we do have to come to a conclusion, as you have opened many doors, and there's obvious a lot of more conversation that could be had. We're grateful for your time. We're grateful for your presence, for your beautiful energy around such a hard topic to approach. I think both times I've heard you speak, I'm just like, keep talking, young man, keep going. I just want to hear more. And where can people go, though, to support or find out or just investigate themselves when they're curious now, like, oh man, I'm going to die, I want to check this out?
regenerationearth.org. Regenerationearth.org is a one-stop shop for you to begin to open the conversation, or to investigate further what you already have been looking at. So I can be reached in all of the different ways via email on there. And we have a newsletter that goes out where we send, for example, this week was the top 5 documents you should have in order if you were to die tonight. These types of things that get people thinking. So regenerationearth.org is a space where people can connect with me, and we can work together in making sure that you're on your journey to hold that all in the same mindset of waking up every day.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to cover? Or I think we've covered quite a bit. So
yeah, I think it just opens the doors, like you said, for other conversations. And thank you for this space to be able to do this. This is a beautiful investment of my time and of yours as well, I think. And I look forward to empowering you. And hopefully, if you don't have your documents in order, we can have follow-up conversations of ways I can support you in making sure that your legacy is protected legally.
Yeah.
And we can continue to just ripple throughout the community and all live in love and step into this idea of oneness. So thank you both so much for having me on, and enjoy. And I'll be right here to serve.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Eric. Appreciate you.
Sweet. Peace, love, and mushrooms to all y'all out there. Great job, Rashad, Eric. It's been a great pleasure. That is it.